When Saturn is in retrograde, everything that supports the foundation of our worlds will be up for review. This is a period of slowing down and re-evaluating over our personal structures, obligations, and goals with more focus and clarity. In a climate-driven combination recession pandemic in the era of never-ending wars and manufactured scarcity, I just turned 27. The powers that be are rolling back on the rights of the people, and I just have over 4 years left on my IUD. However, in this, I have the privilege of living in a dual income home with only my partner and cats. One of those incomes is supported by the privilege of access to higher education. Access that is a privilege provided by the efforts of my family, which I don't dare disregard. These privileges today accommodate stability and the opportunity to look inward. My framework of introspection, supported by the lessons learned from my privilege-driven feeling of noblesse oblige. I follow the justified cliche of a college student who, after exposure to a wider range of diverse perspectives, extended their empathy, attentive to causes beyond themselves. It's an enticing path to take when those causes led you to self-actualization and a life that finally feels authentic. The metaphorical pot has been boiling for a long time, and I felt it in 2016. Years following, I allowed my righteous indignation drive my actions, and I no longer cared about my social standing. My identity was changing dramatically as I felt my world opening, and I learned new words and satisfying ways to articulate my state of being. To my dismay, I had zero clue how to integrate my developed self back to my home, leading to unrecognized people-pleasers' resentment from spinelessly falling into outdated roles around folks I yearned to live authentically around. In turn, I self-isolated once I could no longer deny my unhappiness, and I racked my brain for over a year trying to identify the problem. In healing, I learned I had to embrace the inevitability that every person has their own truths to a shared experience, and that the subjectivity of my truth doesn't make it or others invalid. Bitterness and guilt was the knee-jerk reaction to memories I consider traumatic, primarily because often the events we consider traumatic was merely a regular day to anyone else. Bitterness because I felt hurt. Guilt because I shared my life with well-intended people. Realizing and unlearning this reactive feeling gave way to focusing on what I'm able to control, myself. We act from a result of our experiences and observations. I came from a home that relied on subtext and anticipating needs, which showed itself in my frustration toward under-communicated and unmet expectations. Realizing and unlearning this habit led me to examining my history outside the home. Kids get plenty of expectations weighed on them, a weight that I think gets heavier when you're aware of the struggles of those that provide you your means of life. Sacrifice is a word I always hear used to humble me into obedience. It also led to self-resentment and isolation when you were the only family member who hasn't had to sacrifice anything yet. Admittedly, it was effective, and I learned to be the people pleaser my personality would depend on. When puberty struck and the social stakes were high, I learned that mirroring the interests of others would help me gain friends and the resulting attention. Sometimes the interest would be genuine. Eventually, I gained a self-proclaimed ride-or-die friend group, otherwise a found family in my loneliness, that I hinged my personality on in high school. Satisfied I had a place in a group of respected social standing, I became comfortable in my role that I didn't adequately honor who I was outside that group, because outside that group, I was alone. A lot. I was the only one who moved away for 4 years right after high school, and I was experiencing liberation as a people pleaser who was no longer around the people they've needed to please. I met lifelong friends that shared things I cared about at the same time. I was losing shared interests with people back home. I was having waves of transformative moments separate from the group, just as I was absent from whatever collective transformations they experienced. It was clear on social media I changed, but coming home was so easy falling into the same role I always had. This moment was hard to work through because I lost a core support system, the longevity of which I had a lot of pride in. Eventually, who I was becoming was no longer fitting, which turned into an unhappiness I would later identify as resentment. In time, I learned that resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. This is the point where I learned that healing for me meant I had to have faith that everyone was trying their best with the knowledge they had and that we're simply the sum of our experiences. With that, it came clear to me I didn't have the confidence to seek the space to express my changes when I came back home because of my comfort in pleasing these people. And similarly, the space just wasn't provided to me. There's a stoic belief that if you want to be good, you first need to see yourself as bad. And learning how to appreciate nuance plays a large role in finding inner peace. I'm always someone who, as my sister said, feels big feelings. And I've come to learn that a lot of my frustration and anxiety stems from the inability to articulate these feelings. And often my mind was trapped in a binary of good and bad, which made the feelings so big. I was also influenced by a culture that rarely talks honestly about emotions, if ever, both within and out of the home. This journey to emotional literacy has been grueling, but as I achieve more and more of it for myself, I'm eager to share this new wealth of knowledge. I don't think my experiences are unique, certainly not my emotions, and that is why I offer the lessons I learned from looking inward to everyone. It's hard being human on this timeline, where the current requirements for survival are antithetical to our foundational method of survival, cooperation. Further observations on myself makes me curious about how our social structure damages the psyche of everyday people, where I'm seeing an increase of folks identifying with anxiety, depression, and ADHD, sometimes narcissism. Some might suggest I'm being selfish or dramatic, even so far as to say it's all bullshit. At least, though, my utopian vision I'm trying to share is just for everyone to be more patient with themselves.